Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the absolutely biggest construction projects in history. I want you to picture this. It's the year 1870. Canada is this giant, sprawling piece of land stretching all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. But here's the catch. The country is completely disconnected. So how exactly do you stick a huge country like that together? Well, the solution they came up with completely changed the land, the economy, and literally millions of lives.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our simple roadmap for today's story. We're going to cover 1. Connecting a big country. 2. The Pacific Scandal. 3. A new national plan. 4. The railway workers. And finally, 5. The final spike. All right, starting off with Section 1, Connecting a country.
Let's really try to understand the scale of this first challenge. Think about how easy it is to travel across Canada today. You can just hop in a car, catch a fast train, or take an airplane. But back in 1870, it was incredibly difficult. Just to travel from Toronto to the middle of the country, you had to take multiple boats and ride in these heavy wooden wagons on rough dirt roads. And I promise you, bumping along in a wooden wagon in 1870 was definitely not a comfortable ride. It literally took weeks of hard, exhausting work just to get from point A to point B.
So a new railway was seen as the perfect solution. Now, when the region of British Columbia joined Canada in 1871, they actually made a very strict demand. They said, hey, we'll only join if the government builds a railway connecting us to the east. The government agreed to this, and they set a really strict 10-year deadline to get the whole thing finished.
Now, they weren't just building any normal railway, they were building a transcontinental railway. What does that mean? Well, it's a railway that goes all the way from one side of a continent to the other side. Simple as that. So the absolutely crucial point here is that this massive project was the physical link they chose to unite the entire nation.
But as you might guess, things didn't go smoothly. That brings us to Section 2, the Pacific Scandal.
Big dreams almost always hit big roadblocks, and the search for a company to actually build this railway caused a massive problem. Before we get into it, let's just make sure we're clear on what a scandal actually is. A scandal is basically an action that is considered wrong or even illegal, and when the public finds out about it, it causes this huge wave of shock and anger. Well, Canada was about to face its very first major political scandal.
Let's walk through this timeline together. Back in 1872, Prime Minister John A. Macdonald was really losing popularity right before an election, so he went and asked a wealthy railway builder named Sir Hugh Allen for some campaign money. Allen ended up giving him over $350,000. Macdonald won the election, and magically, Allen's company won the massive contract to build the railway. Pretty suspicious, right? Well, in April 1873, a political rival discovered the evidence, an actual telegram proving Macdonald took that money as a bribe. The public was so angry about this that by November, Macdonald was completely forced to resign.
Now, what's really interesting about this next piece is how the media reacted back then. Take a look at this political cartoon from 1873. If you look really closely at Macdonald's outstretched hand, the artist actually drew the words, "Send me another $10,000" right on his palm. This was their way of mocking the frantic, desperate telegrams he sent asking for more bribe money.
So what does a drawing like this actually mean for a leader? Well, it means the public had completely lost their trust in him. And because of all of this political drama, the building of the railway was severely delayed. That strict 10-year promise they made to British Columbia, it was failing.
Moving the story forward, let's look at Section 3, a new national plan.
Fast forward 5 years to 1878. The economy was doing pretty poorly, and believe it or not, Macdonald actually managed to get himself re-elected by promising a brand new vision. He called this the national policy. It basically had 3 simple goals. Number 1, encourage immigration. He wanted to bring new settlers over to the West to farm. Number 2, implement protective tariffs. This is just a tax on goods coming in from other countries, and it was meant to encourage Canadians to buy local products instead. And finally, number 3, actually complete that railway so they could physically move those people and goods around.
To finally get this railway finished, the government gave a new private company $25 million, along with massive amounts of land. During the planning phase, a scientist discovered an area down in the south called Palliser's Triangle. It turned out to have very rich, fertile soil, perfectly suited for farming. Because of this awesome discovery, they actually moved the railway route further south so the land around it could support all those new settlers.
But plans and money don't build railways, do they? People do. Let's shift our focus to Section 4, the railway workers. Starting in 1881, there was a really huge worker shortage, so the government recruited thousands of men all the way from China. And this table, brilliantly but sadly, illustrates the severe inequality they faced when they arrived. As you can see, Chinese workers were paid just $1 per day, and they even had to buy their own food out of that dollar. Meanwhile, white workers were paid up to $2.50 a day, and their food was given to them totally for free.
Just take a look at the intense conditions in this photo from 1884. Around 17,000 Chinese men were hired, and they were literally handed the absolute most dangerous jobs. They were hanging off cliffs to light explosives and blast holes right through solid mountain rock. Tragically, according to historical oral memories, one Chinese worker died for every single mile of railway track built through those mountains. It's truly heartbreaking.
And we can't forget that the railway also deeply, deeply changed the lives of First Nations peoples who already lived on that land. Plains Cree Chief Poundmaker saw exactly what was coming. Back in 1881, he said, "The whites will fill the country, and they will dictate to us as they please. Our only resources are work, our industry, and our farms." The railway wasn't just a train track. It was a machine bringing rapid, forced change directly to Indigenous lands.
To really grasp the harsh reality of those work camps, we have to listen to the families who were there. Kavan Gen Z, whose grandfather actually worked on the railway, shared this memory. "We were told about separate camps, where one camp was Chinese, the other camp was white. The meager amount they got, they would have to use it to cover everything." It is so incredibly important to hear how families remember the unfairness of those segregated camps. All right, bringing our story to its conclusion, here is Section 5, the final spike.
Despite all that human cost, the political scandals, and the massive Rocky Mountain standing in the way, the track was finally finished. On November 7, 1885, the two ends of the track finally met. In this famous photo, you can see Donald Smith, a very wealthy investor, driving in the very last iron spike. It officially completed the massive project, which was, for sure, a huge victory for the politicians and investors involved.
But if you look right behind Smith in that photo, you'll see an 18-year-old boy named Edward Mallandane. He had actually pushed his way right to the front just to be part of history. 50 years later, he remembered the joy of that moment, saying everybody cheered, the locomotives whistled and shrieked, several short speeches were made, hands were shaken. It perfectly captures the celebration of the men in power who finally saw their dream realized.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want you to really look at this famous photograph one more time. Who is missing from this picture? You see the politicians, and you see the investors, but you do not see the thousands of Chinese workers who died doing the dangerous, backbreaking work. And you certainly do not see the First Nations peoples whose lands were forever altered. It's incredible to celebrate connecting a huge country, absolutely, but we must always ask, who actually paid the price to build it? Thank you so much for joining me to learn about this history today. Keep questioning and keep learning.